Hey guys, it's coming my review for the first season of Only Murders in the Building. And what this show is essentially about is basically we center on three different characters. All of them are in very different places within their lives. They all have very different career paths, but they all do live in this building known as the Arconia. And one day after this murder occurs, it basically brings these three together. And after witnessing this murder, the three of them devise this plan where they are going to be not only be the ones to solve the murder, but they are going to make a whole podcast surrounding it, which hopefully will point them closer towards the answer. So Only Murders in the Building, I was very excited for the show. You know, just I think based on the cast alone that had me very intrigued what this was really going to be, but it also just seemed like a really fun sort of show on Hulu. You know, I love sort of, murder mysteries like this. I think they can be really fun when they're done well, and so I was really expecting for this to be just a really fun show overall, and I gotta say, it surpassed all of my expectations. Only Murders in the Building not only is one of the funniest shows I have seen all year, it also happens to be one of the best. This is a generally really well-written show that really did surprise me in a pretty big way that I really did end up loving pretty much throughout. But we are just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And I mean, like I said, that's the main selling point of the show, I think. I mean, just seeing these three actors in this, I thought was such an interesting choice. I was excited to see how they would all work together, and I'm happy to say I think all of them very much did deliver. Let's talk about Steve Martin, though, because, one, it's really great to see him back on TV. From what I understand, I think this is actually his first show that he's done, like regular TV show, not Saturday Night Live or something like that. This is just the first, regular TV show that he has taken part in, and he does a fantastic job, I think, in this show. I really like the character of Charles. This is someone who, he used to be this, he used to be in this very successful detective drama, but he's kind of retired, and he's not in the greatest place in his life, and I think Martin does a really good job of that. But, I mean, the physical comedy beats, I mean, oh my god, I forgot just how good Steve Martin can be when you give him the right script, because I feel like he hasn't been this good in a while. He is so funny to watch here. There's one moment especially in the finale. Me and my girlfriend watched the show together, and we've been talking about it constantly. He is just such a master of physical comedy, but what I was most surprised about is that this is actually quite an emotional performance, and Martin really does go for it in those quieter moments in this show, and I think he really does nail those perfectly. He really gets into this character, he really disappears into who this guy is, and I think he does a really great job overall, so I was very impressed by Steve Martin here. Martin Short is absolutely hysterical in this show. If I had to pick a comedic standout, it would absolutely be him. This guy is such a wisecracker. He always has something to say, but he's also this like Broadway director of sorts, and he's sort of struggling with that, and I think he does a really great job. He is so fun to watch throughout this entire show, and I think out of everyone, I felt like he was having the most fun. Like, I think Steve Martin and Selena Gomez are too, but I feel like Martin Short was definitely having the most fun out of everyone. And then Selena Gomez is maybe the most impressive performance out of everyone, because this is a much more subtler performance than, say, what Martin and Short are doing. Her performance is much more quieter and subdued, but also is very mysterious. She has a bit more of a connection to this murder, which I'm not going to spoil because they reveal it pretty early on, but it's not something that they revealed in the trailer, so I'm not going to spoil what's going on. I'll talk more about that when we get to the spoilers, but I thought she did a great job as this character of Maybelle. It's a very emotional performance, and Gomez really does kill it here. It's great to see her in another show. I've always said it before, I think she is such a underrated actress, and I'm glad to see she's taking on more projects like this, because when she's given the right role, her talents are utilized very well, and I really like what she did here. And the chemistry between these three, I mean, they just work so well together. Some of the best moments of the show are just the interplay between these three, whether it's, them getting on each other's nerves or them starting to relate to each other. I think they just work so well together, whether, it's the subdued approach from Gomez or the more wackier approaches from the other two. It's just a really nice balance. I think it really is just the perfect match in harmony. They work very well together. together, and I really enjoyed their chemistry throughout this entire show. It's probably one of the best dynamics I've seen in any show this year. But the rest of the casting also does do a really good job. Aaron Dominguez, I really liked him as Oscar. I haven't really seen him before, but I liked the performance that he did give. Amy Ryan is always good, and she gives a very memorable performance here as the character of Jan. I'm not going to say too much about her, but she is this bassoonist of sorts that also is interested in Steve Martin's character, and I thought she gave a very strong performance here. Big stealer for me, though, was Nathan Lane, because he's Nathan Lane. You put Nathan Lane something, he's probably going to give a really strong performance, and that's no exception here. I really enjoyed what he did here as a character of Teddy Demas. This is a character where he's got a few skeletons in the closet for sure, and we definitely do peel back the layers of him more as the show goes on, and I thought that he overall did a really good job here. Divine Joy Randolph, I also really enjoyed. Really, this entire cast, I think everyone seemed like I said, they were having a lot of fun. I think everyone does make some sort of impression. Even the person that's murdered here, Tim Kono, Julian Sheehy has a lot more to do here than you would expect, and I think he gives a really strong performance as this character. So I really did end up enjoying everyone here. But now I really want to get to the directing and the writing, because like I said, I think that's the thing that impressed me the most. Obviously, going into this, you have people like Steve Martin and Martin Short. It's probably going to be really funny. I was not prepared for how funny it was going to be. I mean, this show is nonstop in terms of comedy. It's one of those shows where you will miss certain gags because you're laughing so hard from the previous joke. And I think they did a really great job with that. There's a lot of really great humor throughout this entire show. Like I said, Martin Short especially has so many good one-liners, and honestly, I'd be here all night if I were to talk about some of them, but you can see that he is someone, he's this Broadway director, and so he's very much into, like, the theatricality of it all, and I really enjoyed that. But then you have someone like Steve Martin who doesn't really care about that, so I think the contrast between those two works very well together. I was laughing so frequently throughout this entire show. But what really surprised me is that, surprisingly, what really I think was impressive is that surprisingly the show actually does take this murder pretty seriously. I was just as invested in the murder as I was in the jokes, and I think while the show was very funny, I also was very intrigued. I think when the show has to get darker, it does a really good job with that. It never felt like one was undermining the other. I thought they just had a really perfect balance, and I think what really does help the show is that you have both Steve Martin and John Hoffman helming this one. And John Hoffman's done a lot of comedy stuff before, but I have to assume that he did more of the more dramatic beats, and Steve Martin probably provided a lot of the humor. But I think these two did a really good job at creating this show. I think the balance between the more humorous moments and the more, intriguing or even, emotional moments, I think works really well. I never felt like this was forced or there was too much of the other. I think they just had a really good, back and forth, and I really enjoyed the directing in this show. But the writing as well, I think, is generally really great here. Something that I honestly was really surprised by in this show was how attached I actually got to these characters. I think every single one of them is written very well. Obviously, I knew going in I was probably going to like it because I enjoy watching Steve Martin, I enjoy watching Martin Short, I enjoy watching Selena Gomez, but I really was not expecting them to give us the deep dive that they did, but they really do take the time to dive deep into who these characters are. They all have some kind of goal, they're all struggling in their own ways, and I really did appreciate that. I think every single one of them, by the end of this, I very much did feel for, whether it's Charles, someone that, he can be kind of awkward, he can be kind of stern, but he has a reasoning for being that way. And when we dive deeper into it, there's this one monologue he has, especially in episode 4, it really affected me. I was like, oh my god, I really feel for this character, and it really did bring about a lot of clarity for why he was acting, the way he was in previous scenes. I think, they did a really great job with that. So yeah, I was very impressed by what they did with his character. And then, like I said, Selena Gomez's character, she has a much deeper connection to this murder than you're probably expecting, which I thought they did a really good job actually of hiding. That's something that could have easily been revealed in a promo or something, but Thankfully, I actually think the show did a really strong job of hiding a lot of the details of the show until it actually did come out. So the reveal when this comes about is generally very surprising, but it takes her character in a whole new direction. And once it does, you're that much more invested in her. And I really enjoy what they do with her. Even Oliver, though, as a character, has a little bit more going on. Yeah, he's this Broadway director, but he's got a lot of financial issues he's struggling with. He's not nearly as successful as he once was. And so I think all three of them, have very intriguing storylines in that way. And it also shows why these three really do kind of need each other. They are very similar in many ways. Obviously, yes, they're very different people, but they are going through some similar struggles. And that's something that I really did like about the show, is that while it is really funny, and like I said, I pointed out a lot of really great moments in this show. I mean, there's a lot of characters that show up that are just so fun to watch every time them interact with them. There's this one guy that has a cat. That's all I'm going to say. They keep cutting back to him, and every time they did, I was just in stitches every single time with what they end up doing with that character. Other recurring gags, such as the podcast that they're making and the certain ways that they want to film things, I think that's a lot of fun. But like I said, there's just as much of an emphasis put on the character as there is the humor. And I really did love that a lot, because I think character is that much more important in the show. I've watched so many comedies recently, especially, that forgets to really put the characters there, like Girls Five Eva, for example. Really fun show, but I said it before, my main flaw with that show is that I don't think they went quite as deep as they wanted them to. This is more what I want to see. I want to see just as much put into both of them. And I think this show does an excellent job with that. So yeah, I was really impressed by the writing here, and the mystery as well. You're honestly really intrigued by. This is not just like a very open and shut case. This really is one where throughout the show I was like, oh, it's definitely this person. And then they would suddenly open up another, clue, and I would be like, oh wait, no, that doesn't align. So you really are solving this murder with them, and you're just as, I think, invested in getting to the bottom of this. And I think they do a really good job with, piecing things together. So I was honestly really invested. I was honestly, surprised by how swept up I was in this mystery, how just glued to the screen I was when everything went down. And when it's eventually revealed, who did it and what their motive was, that also made a lot of sense to me. Everything fit in very well. It didn't feel like something they came up with at the last minute. So yeah, in general, I was very impressed by the writing here, way more than I really would have expected to be. So I think they did a really good job with that. The cinematography in the show is also really great. I think the show is very well filmed. You really get that sort of, you definitely feel like the Arconia is its own character. Like I said, there's so many different residents that you end up, that you end up meeting in the show, but just the floors and things like that, they really do a great job of making this feel like its own, location, because obviously it is its own location, but it really does feel like this lived-in setting, and I enjoyed what they did with the cinematography a lot here. There's a lot of really good visual cues in this show, and I really did like that, so I thought the cinematography was very strong. The score, I absolutely adore. Siddhartha Kholsa did compose the score, and I have to say, it's one of those scores where whenever it started playing, it just got me so excited. I love the intro for this show. I love the background music, that da 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 da. It's so good. It pumps you up. It makes you so invested in what's going on. It's the perfect kind of score for a show like this, and I think that he did a really great job with composing it. So I was overall very impressed by his score in the show. I really enjoyed what he ended up doing. It's also a lot of bold choices this show really does make. It's a very risky show, and I think that all of them really did pay off very well. I think the most egregious of which is that the 7th episode of this show, the entire thing is done without any dialogue, and I thought that was a really bold choice. It's not something I knew going into it, and after watching it, I was like, wow, this actually worked really well. It's actually my favorite episode of the entire season because they really just do go for it, and I think it made the episode that much more effective. There was a specific reason why they chose to withhold any dialogue, and I think it very much did pay off in the end. So yeah, I was really impressed by a lot of the choices that they did make here. It's not a simple show. They did not take the easy way out, and I always appreciate when shows do that. I like when shows, challenge themselves. I like when they try to really push the boundaries and really put that trust in their viewer. They don't in any way try to pander to their viewer. They really do put that trust in that whoever's watching this, they're going to appreciate what they're doing. They're going to be along for the ride, and that's something I really did enjoy about this show. It's definitely a very fun watch, but again, it makes some bold decisions, and I appreciate that a lot, actually. The show also, I think, does a really good job at paying tribute to crime fiction. If you're into that kind of thing, I think this show is going to be right up your alley. There's a lot of great nods to actual true crime podcasts and things like that. I think they did that very well. Actually, every episode starts off with a narration of sorts, and I thought that was a really great running tactic. You felt like you were sort of like a part of the podcast, and I really like that. I believe they put every fictitious episode of it onto YouTube, like the podcast that they're doing, which I thought was a really clever idea. So I really enjoyed just how much they committed to that. So yeah, I think that definitely is a big highlight throughout this entire show, especially if you're a fan of true crime podcasts. The editing as well in the show, I think, is really good. They're only 10 episodes long. Some of the episodes are only 26 minutes, but I honestly think that they were the right length. I never felt like the show was, feeling too rushed or that there was too much going on. I thought overall, I think everything was very well paced, and that's something I really did appreciate. That being said, I don't think the show is fully perfect. There are a couple things that do bring it down overall, but I don't want to discount the things that I love. You absolutely should watch this show. It's a great show. Don't let these flaws, get in the way of all the other things I've really, sung the praises of, because I truly do mean this is one of the most enjoyable and fun experiences of the entire year, and I highly encourage anyone to binge this one. But there are a couple things here. First of all, I think there are some underwritten characters here. There's a lot of times where, it seems like we're going to dive very deep into these characters, and we do, but then once, they don't really serve a purpose within the mystery, we kind of just phase them out, and I wanted to see more of them. One character in particular, I feel just kind of disappeared, and I wish that we could have seen more of them, after a certain storyline had ended. I think they could have done a little bit more there, and I think that definitely did bring things down a bit for me. My only other real flaw with the show is the character of Maybelle. Like I said, I really enjoyed her a lot. I enjoyed the personal connection that she had and everything. I liked getting, diving deeper into her past and how she was connected to it all, but it seemed like after a certain piece of information was revealed, she kind of gets a little bit sidelined. I didn't really feel like she was quite as involved with this. She still was, but it very much felt like she was the third. I felt like the second half of the season, it got very Charles-centric, and I'm fine with that because I really enjoyed the character of Charles a lot. I really love the way, the second half of the season played out, but there were many points where I'm like, okay, but Maybelle, what about her? Isn't this very important to her? I felt like they could have done a little bit more with her, and very often she just kind of had some subplots, as well as a forced romantic subplot that I just never really fully bought into. I will say, the way they wrap things up here, because they were renewed for a season 2, it seems like she's going to be a lot more involved next season, even more so than this season, so I think they're going to make up for that. Like I said, I still really enjoyed her character a lot. I just felt like after a certain point, they just didn't do quite as much with her as I would have hoped. Alright, so now I do want to get a little bit more into spoilers because, this whole show's a mystery. It's kind of hard to not talk about them, especially when, the temptation is there, so we're just going to dive into it right now. So yeah, first thing to talk about is really, I think, the biggest revelation of the entire show, besides, of course, who the killer is, and that is Maybelle's connection to the murder. I was honestly really surprised again by how well they kept this under wraps, because I feel like this is something that they could have easily, tried to spoil, or they could have hinted at it, but it was not something that I was ever really expecting, where it turns out not only did Maybelle know Tim really well and is deliberately hiding that from both Charles and Oliver, but at least it seems like they were, actually in a very close relationship. And I don't know if, how far it went and things like that, but it certainly seemed like they had a very deep connection. They had this whole group with their friends known as the Hardy Boys, which they set up so well in that first episode when she talks about how she's done a lot of detective work before and this isn't something that she's new to. I think they overall did a really good job with that. But then episode 2, when they flesh it out more, you really understand her connection more there, where it seems like her and Tim had this genuine love for each other, and you can see she kind of blames herself for everything that happened. So that really made things that much stronger. You now understand, what her role really is in all of this. This isn't just a random murder for her. This is someone that she cared deeply about, and she wanted to try to help as best as she really can. And I think they did a really good job with that, setting up that also her friend Zoe ended up dying as well, and that could maybe be connected to what's going on. I just thought overall they did a really great job when it came to, that particular revelation. It's something that I think could have been a little bit muddled, but they all, they fleshed it out really well in that second episode. And so, like I said, every time we now cut back to Mabel, we now understand, what's really going on. We now understand why she is so intent on figuring this out, why this matters so much to her. I think that's something that they did a really strong job with. So, yeah, I really enjoyed, that whole revelation. And when, Charles and Oliver at first get word of it, they don't trust her. I didn't think for a second she was going to end up being the murderer. That would have been a really dumb direction to take. So I like that she just kind of fessed up to it. But like I said, after that, she kind of just disappears. I felt like they really focused a lot more on her relationship with Oscar. And it's not that I didn't enjoy Oscar. It's just that their relationship, it just wasn't that interesting to me. I enjoyed a few things that they ended up doing there when she's talking to him about how she feels about everything and how hard this really is, because she doesn't want her mom to get involved in this whole investigation. And, Oscar's meeting her parents. I just felt they kind of rushed their relationship overall, which is mainly because of how well they handle the relation between Charles and Jan, which I thought was honestly perfectly paced, especially because they set up that Charles is this guy that doesn't really like people. He doesn't like opening up to people. He's very reclusive in that way. And, you see once he eventually meets with Jan, this is someone that he finally does decide to open up to. And when we get that reveal that Charles is this way mainly because, his wife and their daughter, they went on this trip to Six Flags, and he wanted to do this. It was something that they had all planned. It was all going really well, and then all of a sudden she just kind of disappeared, and he hasn't seen her since then. You understand why Charles is the way he is towards people. He doesn't want that close of a connection because he doesn't want his heart broken again, and it made me care so much more for him as a character. That's really the moment where I realized how good this show is at developing its characters, because Charles, he's not just this guy that used to be in this really popular detective drama that he doesn't really want any involvement with. He doesn't want people to know him for. He is someone that has gone through a legitimate, loss in his life. He's someone that's gone through a lot of hardship, and I think we really do get to see that in his relationship with Jan. That's why you're so invested in it, because it feels like his relation with Jan is so much more healthier. This is someone that he can open up to. This is someone that does generally care about him. She's this bassoonist, and they get very close, and I really enjoyed what they did there. And, I think that it's that much more devastating when we find out her real, her role in all of this. But we'll get into that in a little bit more. The other thing I really do want to talk about, though, are the Demuses. Because this was definitely, for a while, the theory that I was buying into the most. I thought for sure, look, you have Nathan Lane as an actor. you don't just waste Nathan Lane. Like, Nathan Lane's probably going to be the killer. I thought that was the direction they were going to go in, especially after that silent episode, which, like I said, my favorite episode of the whole show. And what I love the most about is that most of that episode is focusing on a character that we haven't seen beforehand in Teddy's son, Theo. But we understand everything this character is going through. You know, this is someone that generally, you know, wants to help people. He especially had a very close relationship with Zoe. He seemed to really like her in that way, and they had this, you know, really sort of strong connection. But Teddy, as a father, was like very hard on him, and you know, it got to a point where it turns out Theo is actually the one. You know, he's been stealing items off of the bodies and things like that. And it turns out that he actually had this crush on Zoe, and she communicated back in ASL. Was a really sweet relationship, and I was like, oh, this is really nice. I like the connection that Theo has. It also confirms that he probably knows Maybelle very well. And it gets to a point where, you know, he gives her this ring. You think that it's going to be this really close connection, but eventually Zoe is, you know, in another relationship, and it's not a very healthy one. Theo kind of wants her to get out of it, but she won't. And they have this argument, and that's what leads Zoe to accidentally being pushed off the building. So that's how Zoe died. I thought that was a really strong moment because it's something that they weren't constantly cutting back to, but it was something in the back of your head where you're like, oh yeah, Zoe is dead. How did that happen? And you know, when they remind us what actually went down there, it's such an amazing reveal because it recontextualizes so much of what you've seen from that character, and knowing that this was simply just an accident and he's felt this immense guilt, but Teddy's wanted him to just kind of cover it up. It's a really good way to mislead you, because this really makes you think, yeah, Teddy probably is the murderer here. If he's telling him to cover this up, he's probably covering up a lot more. And, you know, every interaction they had with Teddy prior to that was very negative. You know, Oliver wants him to buy his musical. He doesn't really want to do it. He seems like he's going to be like a sponsor for their podcast, but he doesn't really go through with that either. So I think that's something they did really well. And then when it turns out that Tim was the only witness and he got this death threat from Teddy, I was honestly really interested to see where that was going to go. And again, I thought that was pretty much proof that it was going to turn out to be, you know, Teddy that murdered him. But obviously, you know, we think at first that it is. You get to episode 9 and it seems like it's Teddy and Theo. It seems like the two of them, you know, have in fact caused this death. It seems like that's what's going on there. But then all of a sudden, it turns out that, oh, Tim was actually poisoned. He wasn't shot. You know, Teddy and Theo weren't in the apartment building at all, actually, when this occurred. And I thought that was a really nice way to turn things on its head, because it kind of reminded me of Knives Out in a way, where we have that mystery and then it's told to us what ended up happening, and then they actually are like, no, this is actually what happened. And I think they handled it just as well here. When, you know, you think that everything is solved, you think they've closed the case, the last 2 episodes might be an epilogue of sorts. I thought they built that up very well, but then when we realize, oh, wait, no, there's another crucial piece of information that we didn't know, I thought they did a really strong job with that, you know. Especially seeing how Jan was poisoned at the, you know, was bleeding at the end of the last episode. You know, we were led to believe that it's probably not her. So when we get that moment where, you know, Charles goes to see her performance and it turns out she actually wasn't a bassoonist, it's another woman that's a bassoonist that has replaced Jan at the first chair. It is such a unfortunate moment. Like, you feel so bad for Charles here because this is someone that he was generally connecting with, and at this point it seemed like the only person that he had, because he turned his back on Oliver, turned his back on Maybelle. They didn't want Jan involved with this investigation at all. While he did, they didn't like the advice that Jan was giving them. And he basically has like turned his back on them at this point. And it's you know, when you realize that, oh, she was actually playing him this entire time. I thought it was a really strong reveal, and I really liked the way all of that played out. But like I said, I wanted more from the Demuses. Like, they just kind of disappear after episode 8. And I wanted to see the aftermath. Like, I wanted to see what happens to Teddy, with him almost going to jail. What do they, what happens to them after this? Is Theo going to confess to, Zoe and her falling over the ledge? Like, I wanted to see a little bit more resolution there, and I think we're going to see them next season. I would assume they do, especially with what the murder is going to involve now, which I'll get into. But again, I wanted to see more of those two characters because I was very into their story, and then they just kind of like dropped off of it, and that was a little bit disappointing to me. But the finale more than made up for that. Oh my god, the finale here was so good when right off the bat they tell us that yes, Jan is the murderer. They're not trying to mislead us this time. Jan is in fact the person that was romantically involved with Tim. She killed him apparently like after a day because they broke up like very quickly. And that moment where Charles is confronting her is so well handled because you don't know if he is buying into, what she's saying, or if he's just trying to bait her and he's trying to get her, confessional that she ended up doing it. And when you realize that he did in fact he did in fact believe Oliver and Maybelle, I was like, yes, it was just such a great moment for Charles. This guy, like I said, that was so reclusive, wanted nothing to do with any of this at first. And the fact that he's the one that basically is the most involved, it's just such great writing in that way. And, when he realizes he has been poisoned, like I said, the scene where he's in the elevator was really great comedically. It's not like the show completely abandoned its comedy. It's still very much there. Even though it's a lot more intense, there's still a lot of really funny moments, and I really did love that. And then we get to a point where Jan basically wants to gas the entire building. She wants to set the entire thing ablaze, and they're able to stop it, and basically, eventually this scuffle ensues, and I love the conversation that, like, Charles has with Jan, where, he really, like, talks her down there. It was such a great moment, and again, I was really surprised that it turned out to be Jan. I didn't think they were going to go in that direction, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, one, similar to Nathan Lane, you don't waste Amy Ryan. Like, she's a really talented actress. They definitely utilized her very well. But again, it was also a really great story for Charles because what it seems like, at least this is going to lean into, is him reconnecting with his family. He texts his daughter, I believe, and she actually does text him back. They engage in this conversation of sorts. So I'm willing to bet that he's going to make a genuine effort to try to reconnect with that family. Now that he's opened up to someone about it, it's given him the courage to open up to them. He realizes that he needs them, I think, and I think that's going to be a really great moment for him as a character. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they really do there, but even more intrigued to see how this next murder is going to play out, because they set up really well that there's this woman that everyone's annoyed by. Everyone can't stand her. They want her gone. They don't want anything to do with her whatsoever. This character, Bunny, she's like the lead board member. She doesn't want them involved with this murder at all. She wanted them arrested. She thought that they were crazy. You see that her and Maybelle are like butting heads a bit, and then all of a sudden, Bunny just ends up dead, and Maybelle's like, very like suspiciously close to her body, and eventually they're all arrested for it, and we don't know what's really going to happen from there. But oh my god, I mean, I wasn't sure if I was going to like the idea of them continuing the show after this season, but with the way they end things off here, it seems like they have so much more story to tell. There is so much more that they can dive into here, and I'm very excited to see how that all does play out, because, again, I mean, these characters are kind of at narrative highs. Like, Oliver's reconnecting with his son, Charles is reconnecting with his family, Maybelle has gotten that clarity from Tim's death. She's in a nice relationship with Oscar. So this really is going to put a wedge into a lot of things, and I'm excited to see where they really do go with this. I think that they're going to do a really good job in giving us something that's a lot different, because now it's not these three characters that are creating this podcast, it's these three characters that were directly involved with what happened. It's not just Maybell, all of them are directly involved with what went on, and so I'm excited to see what they really do end up doing with that there. But like I said, I think in terms of the mystery and everything, it very much did pay off. I think you can go back and you can understand, what they were really trying to do. I think they did a really strong job with that, and I was very impressed when it came to, the reveal of everything, but also where this show is going. All of that is stuff I'm very excited to see. Overall, I think if you're looking for a show that is a lot of fun, but also one that surprisingly has a lot of compelling characters, as well as a really intriguing mystery, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a show that's more entertaining right now than Only Murders in the Building. I think the show checked all the right boxes. It has three wonderful performances from Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, respectively, as well as a really great supporting turn from Amy Ryan. It's got a really juicy mystery that ends in a way that I don't think you're really expecting. It's got a lot of interesting reveals that I think really do deepen the layers of many of these characters. It's consistently funny. It's very entertaining to watch, and overall, it's just one of the most delightful shows that I've watched of the entire year. I think there are a couple things that do bring it down. There are some characters that are a bit sidelined, but overall, with the way things are set up for season 2 especially, I could not be more happy with the way this show really did turn out. I was expecting going into this that I would get a really solid, fun show with 3 actors that I really do enjoy, but not much else. Instead, I got what actually was a pretty intriguing mystery, but also a compelling look at 3 characters that are kind of in, difficult places in their lives, and us seeing them sort of, move past that by investigating this murder, and I think they do a really strong job with that overall. So overall, guys, I really did enjoy the show a lot. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year so far. I'm going to give Only Murders in the Building Season 1 overall an A-. But over, guys, to my review of the first season of Only Murders in the Building. Then once you guys saw this season overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.